Welcome to the Athletic FC podcast with me, Ayo Akinwolere. Whether it's Manchester City, Chelsea or even Bournemouth, more and more Premier League clubs are sitting as part of a multi-club ownership portfolio. But why? How do multi-club ownership groups work? Are they purely about making money, or do they help guarantee success on the pitch? Right, with us today, we've got Matt Slater, who will be with us for the next 3 days, actually, as we take time during the international break to explore the concept of multi-club ownership, or, as you'll probably hear more often now, MCOs. Right, Matt, this is fascinating because we've spoken about this before several times on the podcast, but just break it down very quickly. In the next 3 episodes, what are we looking to take on?
Well, I think the first thing we're going to try and do is just define some terms, right? What are we talking about? I think we're going to bandy these phrases around. I just think we shouldn't assume too much knowledge, right? So what is a multi-club group? And I think people are probably grasping, right? Well, that's one owner or one group of owners and several clubs, right? And that could be in one sport. It could be across a range of sports. So we're going to get into all of that. So once we've sort of defined basic terms, we're going to then move on. Right, why? Given that we talk so often about how hard it is to run one club, why would you willingly, knowingly run several? Now, again, different strokes for different folks. There are some people doing it because they think they can save a lot of money on back office, just sort of consolidate and, you can cut costs there. Other people are doing it because they're really, really interested and they're convinced that you can make money on player trading. So you create almost like a little walled garden. You have outposts in really interesting places for players. So you're everywhere, you're seeing everything. And then once you've got them in, a bit like a baseball farm system, you then keep them in. And as they move up the pile, maybe they make your top club and you've saved some money on a transfer you didn't need to make. Or they're not quite good enough for your top club and you sell them. And that kind of then money just trickles back in and you just keep going and going and going and going. Other people are doing it because it's all about strategy, right? They want to be in key markets and they are maybe sort of projecting something to the world. Other people it really is about the top club and winning. And they think that by having a farm system, for the other reasons, that player development, that recruitment, that cutting of costs, everything just serves the mothership. So there are loads of reasons. That's why people are doing it. It's one of those, it has become sort of the idea of the moment. But at the moment, it is kind of an idea.
Yeah.
No one's really, I don't think anyone's absolutely nailed it. People have got close and people are sort of in the process maybe of nailing it, but no one has smashed it out of the park. I've got all my metaphors all over the place here. Some people have actually failed, so you could be like, is it one of those ideas? So that's where we are with it. It is, like I say, so many of the conversations I have about buying new clubs, it's someone that's already bought a club somewhere else, and it is actually a multi-club play.
Well, Matt, look, through this series, what do you think the average person, like you and I, fans of football, might get demystified through this process of MCOs that we're trying to deconstruct? Right,
if we do it right, this is what we're going to get, I think. What they are, the different types, so I've already outlined, is it about player trading? Is it about serving the mothership and winning? Is it about cutting costs? Is it like an investment play? So hopefully we're going to work out the different types. We're going to talk about who's doing it well. We're going to find some examples and we're going to hear why they're doing it. So that's part 2. And then I think we're going to also talk about some of the cons, if you like, the negatives. I don't, from the outset, this is an unproven thesis, and we have seen over the last 5-10 years several examples of clubs that have been added to multi-club groups who frankly feel like they've been colonised. They have become feeder clubs. No one, unless you sort of set out to be a farm team, unless it's kind of baseball where your kind of place in the pecking order is very, very clear. I wouldn't want my team to become part of a multi-club group. Well, particularly if it's sort of the club that I felt that we were serving wasn't much bigger than me. I'd be thinking, well, hold on, it's like you've chosen a favourite child here. What's all this about?
What about my club?
Yeah, exactly.
When do we win a trophy? When do we get the best players?
And we've seen a lot of this. There's been pushback in certain countries like Belgium, Netherlands, France, where so many of these multi-club groups have looked, right. They've had a mothership. They've had the big, alpha club, and they're thinking, what markets do I need to be in? Where are players? Well, players are in Belgium. Is great for player development. Paris, and they're also sort of thinking, well, those clubs, those leagues don't have great TV deals. There's a lot of losses there. They kind of struggled in COVID. Basically, they're cheap. They're affordable. They're a little bit desperate, some of them. So Belgium in particular has just been picked apart by multi-club investors. France is going that way. And frankly, some of those fans are like, no, it wasn't that long ago where our owner was the local Mr. Big. And, we didn't always agree, but at least that guy, we were top of his list of priorities. So that, I think, is something we're going to explore too.
Yeah, I love that. And also, I'd love to know if anyone's actually making any money out of it. Anyway, today's episode is focusing on what MCOs are involving. A conversation you've had with AJ Swoboda from 21st Group. Now, let's break this down very quickly. Who is AJ Swoboda and what is 21st Group?
Well, we'll do 21st Group first. They are, there's several of these out there. They're a really clever consultancy. They use a lot of data and analytics, and they advise clubs, leagues, mainly clubs and leagues, to be honest, potential investors on, how best to structure their businesses, to spot opportunities, clubs to buy. They do all kinds of work. Like I said, it's very sort of data-led. Football and golf, I think, are their main sports, but they're into everything now. So I've known those guys for a while. AJ is their guy in the States. Okay. He's their guy on the West Coast. He's very, very good at sort of football investment. How often do we talk about football takeovers and the money is American money? He's the guy that they should be calling to do due diligence, to sort of talk through their plan. So that's why I thought he'd be great for this.
All right, well, let's find out more about what MCOs actually are, and more importantly, who actually does it well. Here's Matt Slater in conversation with AJ Swoboda.
AJ, thanks very much for joining us. Can we just start off by explaining what is multi-club ownership?
Basic definition, multi-club ownership refers to a single, either an entity or an individual or investment group owning stakes in multiple sports organizations across different leagues, different countries. I think the term MCO in particular has really led to an assumption of that being just football clubs. But it doesn't necessarily need to be just football organizations. It could be multi-sport as well. So it can take a variety of forms. It could be something that's true common ownership, majority control of a bunch of organizations that all are branded similarly. So I think the likes of City Football Group or Red Bull. It could be more affiliate networks. So, some majority control stakes, some minority stakes, but some joint ownership that, infers some level of coordination or cooperation across those entities or across those regions. Or it could be exclusively a minority investment play that has less to do with the operations and more to do with the exposure to sport and wanting to diversify the financial exposure to sport across an industry. So you think a firm like Arcto Sports Partners, who pride themselves on taking specifically non-control positions.
What can you tell me about the history of it? When did, let's say, football people start talking about MCO?
The first real concept of that actually was Sir Alex Ferguson. So back in the late 1990s, Manchester United loaned a bunch of players to a Belgian club. I think that was way before the time of what we're talking about now, but I think at least planted the seed. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, planted the seed of what an informal or formal alliance between clubs might look like across different regions. I think the first, in football, the first real formal example of it, I think would have been Red Bull. So they created a model with Leipzig, Salzburg, and the New York Red Bulls. I think that concept put them on the map. They were obviously branding Red Bull, the energy drink, and using sport to do so, play a certain type of way, have a certain model to how they want to field a roster and have that be emblematic of their company brand. And I think that then led the way to the likes of Manchester City and the creation of City Football Group. And then since then, it's been a bit of a hockey stick curve up to the right of different ownership groups and different owners finding different reasons why an MCO model might work for them. And we've definitely, we're in inning 4 or 5 of the progression of what that model might look like as people look at other examples and then find their own version of creativity of what that might look like.
Okay, well, we've got a definition, we've got some history. Let's do the benefits. Give me the thesis. Throw them all out there. Why do we do this?
I think the reality is in multi-club ownership, it can be incredibly varied depending on the institutions you're involved in, but ultimately the thesis of the investors and the principle of whatever it is that they're starting off. So the classic advantages that are mentioned are things like player development, creation of player pathways, data-driven scouting and recruitment networks, kind of financial efficiency or operational efficiency, shared resources within clubs, brand expansion, global sponsorship plays. I think largely those, any MCO will have some version of those. Some of them will be weighted more towards some than the others. Some of those benefits will actually drive a financial return. Others might be more of a nice sound bite for investors if they're looking to raise capital, or a nice sound bite for the media if they're looking to quell concerns about what they may be doing. And so again, for every MCO that we'll talk about today, but others that might pop up, I'd really encourage anyone listening or thinking about this topic to really drill down into what's really the leading strategy here, what's really the leading motivation for why a group is doing this, because in our research and our understanding working with groups, it's really, truly varied.
So AJ, those are the positives. Give me the negatives now. Why? What are the potential pitfalls? Why? What should you be careful of if you are going into an MCO strategy?
Owning and operating just one sports team, one football club is difficult, and doing it successfully requires real and consistent effort. And a real grip of what the problems are, who the people are that can help find those solutions, and sticking to, really running it like a business and sticking to whatever your strategy might be in order to run that successfully. Even being a minority investor in a sports team, football club, is not for the faint of heart. Doing that across multiple organizations, particularly if it's your first time doing that, starts to multiply the complexity of those challenges. You're talking different regions, different cultures, different tiers within the ecosystem, perhaps, so different levels of professionalism, and the amount of variables and challenges you're dealing with can multiply very quickly. So I think that's probably the starting off point for what a challenge or con would be with MCOs. And if in a world of sports teams not being run the most efficiently in global football, taking on multiple might prove quite an operational burden that can be underestimated by new players or entrants in the space. Other challenges or kind of controversies that I imagine you have in mind are things like potential conflicts of interest. So UEFA and FIFA trying to figure out how to draw lines around organizations that traditionally were independent but are now interdependent. I think Red Bull is a great example of that historically. I think that was probably the first time as Leipzig improved as an organization, and Salzburg did as well, and you had two teams playing in the same UEFA competition. Red Bull needed to create clear lines of demarcation between what was an operational MCO, what maybe was a branded MCO to the public, to make sure that they could quell some of those concerns. So likewise, competitive integrity issues, if teams are prioritizing player development in some region and diminishing the performance of some teams in order to help the performance of another team, what is the impact of that, not only on that team's fan base and community, but on that broader region, right? So if an entire league becomes a bunch of teams owned by MCO owners, but those clubs are not the marquee club or equal to being the marquee club, then what does that create for that environment as a whole? Related to that is fan backlash. So we've seen that a lot in the last handful of years as newer MCO owners or operators have come to the fold and maybe haven't had the right understanding of how to engage with a community and the club around their strategy, and instead are just focused on their kind of strategy in the clouds. There's also a lot of regulatory uncertainty. So governing bodies and leagues are changing they're evolving their rules as different actors in the space stretch the bounds of what counts as an MCO and how different relationships work. So that could sometimes be a challenge. I think that's kind of an interesting segue into another type of multi-organization ownership model, which is there are a lot of these MCOs that will leverage other assets in their broader portfolio to create value for their property, right? So an ownership group might also own a brand or have a certain influence in the brand and use that brand to sponsor their team and create value for both entities within their investment portfolio. Is that a conflict of interest? Is that legitimate? Working through those types of problems, I think, will only be more and more necessary, but it's starting to create a more complex ecosystem that maybe reflects more of traditional business.
Well, it certainly is. Well, given all those potential problems and actual problems, real problems, and we talk about them on the podcast regularly, why has multi-club become almost the sort of idea du jour? Why do I hear it constantly, particularly, AJ, dare I say, from people from your side of the Atlantic? It seems to be the only idea in sort of kind of football M&A at the moment. Why is that?
Yeah, it's a good. I appreciate the jibe. I think again, I would really be hesitant to classify or archetype North American investors in a particular way, because there really is a pretty wide array of both understanding as well as maybe respect and caution about the history of global football or European football or whatever it may be. So it's very difficult, given particularly the amount of activity coming out of North America, to kind of pin everybody in the same description. One thing that is true about North American approaches to sport is it really is a different ecosystem. I think by and large, the North American sports ecosystem is commercially driven. I think there is an understanding that ownership has the kind of right or the duty to make money and create value for whatever that enterprise may be that they have. There's also been, I think, a history of this multi-club ownership concept in North America that predates a lot of this growth. So I'd kind of peg MCO growth really starting to pick up in maybe 2015, 2016 in global football. But if you think about ownership groups of major sports franchises, a lot of the initial ones started in North America, whether that's Kroenke Sports and Entertainment, you name it. There are a lot of groups that might own multiple franchises within the same city and try to create a bit of a monopoly of sports and entertainment in that city. It's venues, it's sports teams, it's potentially media companies or something around that. And then there are others that have that same construct, but it's not defined to just a particular region or a particular city. So I think there's definitely more of an understanding of the fact that can be done, whether that's at a holding company level or just sharing IP between sports organizations. And let's be real, I guess I'm North American in the sense that I believe that sports organizations should be run as businesses. But what I mean by that is, if you're running a good business, you are treating fans right, you are treating the community right, you are making sustainable decisions that are good for the health of that entity, because that's good business. What I don't mean run as a business is, run it into the ground and take all the money out of it while you're doing that, right? So I think there's I think it's difficult in today's world of sports, professional sports, to believe that professional sports should only be, their role as an owner should be a benefactor, should be willing to just lose money endlessly on behalf of the communities success. I think that's certainly a model, but I think more and more what you're seeing is a transition to more of this North American model, which is, can you create good business, which is good for the community, which is good for the team, and as a result, that's obviously the hardest thing to do, but I think that's what people are pursuing. So long-winded intro to saying I think now what we've got is as North American investors have come into looking at international sport, and particularly global football, particularly European football, for the scale of influence that you can have and the level of I guess operational growth and improvement that they believe that these teams can have relative to what the norm is in North America. They say, if we're going to go do this for one, should we build a strategy where we can do this across multiple, and does that create different avenues of growth for us? I will at the same time though be appropriately, I guess, skeptical. I hope this doesn't come off as cynical, that most of the people that are trumpeting the value of MCOs are people who are still fundraising to raise money to be able to invest in MCOs. You don't often see people who are using their own money, or people who already own multiple stakes in multiple organizations, out there broadcasting the benefits of MCOs that maybe I laid out at the beginning. And I think that really is where the rub is that we're seeing in the industry now. We've had, again, the fortune of working with some owners who critically want to understand MCOs are being mentioned everywhere. Let's really try to build a business model around this. And if it works and we believe in it, let's go do it. And if it doesn't work, we're going to put it in the back burner and we're not going to pay attention to it. And so I do think there's a kind of depth versus breadth dynamic going on right now with the reference of MCOs, where it's kind of this tagline, headline grabbing way to try to explain narratives, but in reality, the way you make the economics work can be very different depending on what that strategy might be.
I think that leads me in nicely to a question really about who's doing it well in terms of their own terms of reference. So who is actually delivering on what they set out to do?
I mean, the obvious one I think will be City Football Group or Red Bull. I'll go with City Football Group because I think they really pushed the envelope that Red Bull started. But they've got a very clear kind of holding company at City Football Group, operational network and strategy. They've got folks who work across multiple clubs, and they have a very, I guess, a clear top-down directive of what they want to be doing, but then they have a set of a management team that's truly empowered along the directive of what the global strategy is. They're empowered to then figure out how to make their own decisions within the kind of broader pieces of the portfolio. We've got a strong recruitment network across continents. They've been really building out their brand, both the City Football Group brand, but really the Manchester City brand in big markets that may not be traditionally footballing markets, where you might think a player coming from that market will then play for Manchester City in competition. But they found ways to extend the reach of their brand and their I kind of liken them to Disney as a corporation. So your Manchester City players are these characters that you want people to start to follow, you want people to start to understand, and you want to then spread that awareness around the world as much as you can, because that ultimately helps the kind of crown jewel in your empire. So it's not to say that their efforts in New York City, for example, or in Girona or in South America are invalid, but there is this kind of global brand building strategy that they've been building out at both the club level and the player level that I think has been pretty difficult to see anyone do better over the last, call it, decade of that effort, since they've really been starting their multi-club expansion.
Yeah, well, that's good. There's some good examples there. Let's, I think in one of your earlier answers you were talking about, well, I asked you about the potential negatives, the cons, if you like. And you did address probably the most obvious in terms it's the loudest, which is fan opposition, particularly if you are not that top dog within an ownership group. This idea of being a farm team or a feeder team. How can you manage that? Let's just say you are the owner of this group. How do you manage that? How do you make the second, third, fourth team feel loved, like you haven't got a favourite child?
Yeah, it's a good It's a good question. There's certainly, again, there's not, I think that the only thing you could say as a playbook to answer that question would be you have to genuinely want to help each of those clubs and the communities around those clubs. You have to genuinely be wanting to try to operate. You can't only look at them as a farming operation. And that requires, on the ground operators or, executives that can truly understand the problems at a local level and figure out solutions that are conducive to whatever the ownership strategy might be, but also to fit into the environment, the local environment that are there. And that just takes time and it takes real effort. And I strongly believe that fans are, should be holding owners' feet to the fire, but they're also smart. Like they'll see what's genuine. I think fans can forgive owners for making mistakes if there's genuine effort to either make a positive change in the first place or genuine effort to mitigate and learn from those mistakes and then figure out how to change course and move forward. So I don't think it's a situation where once you break the glass, it's broken and you can't put it all back together. But it requires real work. And that gets to my earlier point of, folks who think running an MCO is the kind of panacea for sports ownership, diversifies your operations, you get efficiencies and, operating at a hold code level. I think they're not fully appreciating the blocking and tackling that needs to happen locally with individual clubs that happens over the course of a week. And again, we're having the luxury of us being able to partner with owners over the course of seasons and multiple seasons. It's the classic Muhammad Ali quote, right? Everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face, and like nothing punches you in the face like basically an annual football calendar, where as soon as one season's done, you're gearing up for the second season, and all of these grand plans that you have in the clouds are very difficult to implement when you're also fighting fires left and right, and doing that across multiple regions can be difficult. So I think like the approach to it that I would recommend is like really understanding locally how to operate. And I think for us, the position we play in the ecosystem, it would be much more intentional about why you're going into an ecosystem, why you're going into a competitive environment, why a particular asset fits what your MCO strategy or broader ownership strategy might be, as opposed to snapping it up because it's available and then thinking that you can kind of turn it into whatever it is you'd like. And so I think it's good business, but it's community oriented business as opposed to kind of only doing it from a foreign lens.
Okay, one last one then. So I think we've got the definition, the history, the pros, the cons, people who are doing it well, some things to look out for. Where do you see this going? Where are the trends going with MCO? So what kind of countries? I mean, obviously people were thinking Brazil, Portugal as a kind of landing spot for Brazilian players, obviously Africa, Eastern Europe. Where's buzzy? Where's the sort of buzzy place? And then as a sort of second bit of this question, is it maybe not buying another club? Is it maybe doing something else? Is it maybe buying a different sport? Is it not a club? Is it going to academy level? Where are the clever people going with this?
It's a great question. Again, like I mentioned earlier, I think I'm mixing sports metaphors, but I think we're in inning 4 or 5 of what an MCO looks like, and I'm sure there'll be further and further complexities and iterations as the world matures. So I don't think we're not putting the genie back in the bottle. I think we've gone down a path that I think we'll continue going down. I think the way to maybe structure answering that question is the intent behind an MCO sporting led, or is it commercially led, or is it some combination of both, right? So if it's sporting led, if you think about the global football ecosystem, just the professional ecosystem, I guess you've got, call it 60, 70 world-class players who are like truly what you would classify as kind of best in the world. And then the pyramid of players that sit underneath that in the ecosystem is unbelievably vast. So you've got then 250, 300 elite kind of big 5 players who you'd expect to be starting for, a potentially winning team in those leagues. You've got another 1,000 players that are a bit more average that are getting real minutes for a competitive team in those leagues. You've got a couple thousand players that round out the rest of that type of a tranche of teams, and then you've got like 30,000 other players that are around the ecosystem. So the breadth of what you can do lower down in the ecosystem is kind of eye-watering. It's difficult to really imagine, and I would imagine that there will be owners who will come up with more and more innovative strategies for how to use the breadth of that ecosystem, not at the true echelon of the sport, but lower down where there's less professionalism, there's less structure. You can actually find more of an edge without that much more resource if you just know where to look or you know how to operate. I think a great example of that they tend to fly under the radar, but Right to Dream as an organization have been around for I think a couple decades now and had a very particular model for how they wanted to not only scout but really produce and create a kind of professional talent ecosystem. They originally started in Africa and Ghana, and then as they started to do that and had success developing sports individuals that operated more like a professional sportsman, then they found a way to get a foothold in Europe, and they bought a team in Denmark that wasn't a big city team, didn't have a big commercial brand, and used that as a destination point to be able to test their talent at a professional level. And that, FC Nordsjælland has still had huge success in European competition while executing the strategy that they've looked to execute, which is trust young players, empower young players, team effort. They always played some of the youngest kind of starting 11 squads in European competition, and they perform. And then what do they do from there? They go and invest in a majority stake of an MLS team. This is their inaugural season in San Diego, and they are doing well. I think they're surprising everyone in the league with not only their style of play, but their talent that isn't marquee talent, but it's from that huge ecosystem of global football, and they have a really clear sports operations lens through how to find talent in that murky ecosystem. So I think you have more of those types of examples. I think the red and gold kind of MCO model that exists between LAFC and Bayern Munich, I think, is another version of that. It's less top down, but it's kind of a structured, more creative way to go about building an MCO than needing to have like an owner and the same owner and chairman in any club around the world. That would be very sporting led, and I think there'll be more of those. And I think there'll be a lot more commercially led focuses too, where an owner might say, hey, we're a North American sports franchise, or we have multiple of them, and we know how to build stadiums or how to commercialize match day revenue, or know how to kind of elevate the brand IP of a sports organization into something that creates value, and then as a result can produce revenue. So we're going to take that model and we're going to bring it into a new sport of European football, and we're going to find these assets where we might not actually even be involved in the sporting operations, but we can help build out a new stadium, or we can help figure out how to commercialize a new stadium that may exist. And I definitely think there'll be more of that, because I think North American investors see an opportunity for growth of that North American sports mindset. And then I think you'll have some folks that'll look at it through the operational efficiency lens. So, very crudely, we know how to operate professional sports teams. It may be in a different league or maybe in a different sport, but there's a general method to the madness of knowing how to run a sports team like a business, but have it be a successful sporting product, not just something that you extract dividends from. And we're going to take that model to other sports. It might be new sports, it might be more venture sports, it might be existing sports that need, that commercial partner or an operational partner that sits behind the existing ownership. But I think you'll start to see that as well. And again, Arctos clearly have been doing this well over the last 5-6 years, but they bring a wealth of expertise. They're not trying to pick a roster or pick players, but they're bringing a wealth of expertise and a network. So when an owner needs help or needs a partner to look to, they can pick up the phone and speak to someone that's been solving those problems all over the world.
Such an interesting interview, Matt. Honestly, so fascinating to hear what AJ Swoboda had to say from 21st Group. And I think you caught him off guard on a couple of questions, if I'm honest, but he answered it, hopefully, as honest as he possibly could. Now, a lot of the focus on investors from North America, understandably. I was really interested in what he had to say about how investors from across the Atlantic see this as a business opportunity, Matt, as opposed to being benefactors. What do you make of that, firstly? But secondly, that point he said about buying a business, but also not just taking from the business and thinking about the fans. Is there such a thing as ethical capitalism? Is there such a thing as buying and also thinking about the people that might have made this club what it is?
Oh yeah, we're getting into some deep territory early on here. Well, look, right, how am I going to do this? I feel like we're sort of getting into a bit of philosophy, a bit of economics.
Yeah.
I think good capitalists,
Yeah.
and Americans would say they're good capitalists,
Yeah, I've heard that one.
would tell you that good business is looking after your best customers. Now, I know football fans go, oh, God, I don't want to be a customer, I'm a fan. Right, okay, fine. If we can just sort of get over that. You are customers. You're in the entertainment, they're in the entertainment business. The thing that you like is an entertainment product. I know we feel about it more strongly than we do about, a favourite film or a TV programme. But if we can just sort of get our heads around that, a good owner should be trying to please you, should be trying to give you what you want. So is it ethical or not? They would just say it's good business. So that is, I want a good product on the pitch, right? So I'd like to win. I'd like somewhere nice to park. I'd like a nice range of drinks and food at reasonable prices. I'd like to go to the club shop and see a good range of stuff there that's reasonably priced. I'm a good guy, so I'd like this stuff to be kind of ethically made, and I'd like the idea of us doing something in the community because, I'm about that. So all these things that we would consider ethical, a cold-hearted capitalist would say, yeah, I've got no problem with that because I'm about making my best customers happy. I want them to keep coming back. I want them to spend longer here, spend more money. It's all good. That's your virtuous circle. So, does it always work out like that? No, of course not. In any sphere. Are there times where ethics and cash sort of hurtle into each other and one of them falls over? Yeah. And, otherwise I wouldn't really have a job. That's kind of what I do here. So, generally speaking, I think you can do ethical things because it's in your interest to do them.
Okay, fair enough. Now, City Football Group and Red Bull were two operations, actually, and examples that AJ noted as MCOs that were doing it well. Is it that because they're probably the longest running ones, in essence? Red Bull have been doing it for years. City Group, I mean, goodness, it's from America to Australia to the UK to, wherever. They've got quite a few clubs.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, look, there are people that have been doing it a bit longer. So, a good example would be the Potsos, Udinese and Watford.
Yeah, for sure.
People first really started talking about this with ENIC. ENIC are the people that ultimately own Spurs. I don't want to get into a whole other podcast about who actually owns Spurs at the moment, but theoretically they do. They were doing this in the 80s, 90s. They were sort of buying little stakes in Slavia Prague and Vicenza and lots of other clubs. So they were the ones that kind of got UEFA thinking about this, the potential conflicts of interest and the impacts on their own competitions. So people have been doing this for a while, and also, as AJ talks about, there have been multi-club models that have spanned sports. So this is really common in America, where Mr. Big will own the baseball,
sure,
the NFL team, the ice hockey team, right? So that's been out there for a while. And even sort of Sir John Hall at Newcastle was doing this idea of the rugby team, the football team, and you could look at Barcelona with their handball and their basketball. So look, that stuff's out there. But you're right. More recently, and I think if we are just sort of talking about what we have come to understand as MCO, the two big examples are City Football Group and Red Bull. And it is because they're big, they're successful, and they're sort of out there, and they're unashamedly a multi-club group. What I think is fascinating about those two is how different they are. So City Football Group is very much about making Man City win. It's about being in strategic places, so it works for Abu Dhabi, it works for the money. It's a very long-term play. They've invested billions. Man City make money, or certainly wash their face. The rest of the group lose money. Now, they would say, that's because we're playing a 20, 30, 40-year game. That's what sovereign wealth does. And don't worry, we're going to make money in the long term. And they may well be right. I suspect they will. But at the moment, it is a very cash-heavy play to sort of help Man City and then help Abu Dhabi be in all the key places.
Okay.
Red Bull, on the other hand, was to sell fizzy drinks. All right? So just think about the way they play football. Fast, vertical football. Young, buzzy. They all play the same way. They press. What does it make you think of?
Yeah.
Cabernet drinks.
High energy drink, yeah. High energy
And then
drink,
think about the other sports they do. It's all... It's snowboarding, it's mountain biking, it's F1.
Octane, high octane. Yeah. Gotcha.
So, and they've been really clever. They've hired really good people, and their model is young players. There is a sort of player trading element that kind of is supposed to sort of sustain it all. But they're in all the right places. I mean, okay, they started in Germany and Austria, which is where the company's based, but they got into Brazil early, they're in the States. You know, they've been a clever group. And when I talk to people, they often sort of go, yeah, everyone, okay, look, of course City Football Group are really good because they've been successful and they do loads of smart things. But Red Bull have probably delivered more bang for your buck, if you like.
When you said UEFA there, Matt, I thought that's quite fascinating because I wonder if there are some conflicts of interest with multi-club ownership. You know, let's say the same teams that are owned by the same group end up playing in the Champions League or even the Europa League. You know, that's quite a fascinating one to think about.
There is, and I think this is something that has kind of crept up on UEFA. So if we go right back to when ENIC were doing it, they were sprinkling their money around on similar-sized teams who could, theoretically, all qualify for Europe. There were 3 competitions back then as well. And that was the problem. I can't remember which competition it was. I think it was the UEFA Cup in the mid-90s, and 2 or 3 of them had qualified. And yeah, UEFA had to say, look, this is pretty basic stuff, right? We can't have 1 owner, 2 teams. This just isn't great for the competition. So they sorted that. And then no one really worried about it for a while. I think for several reasons. One, because the multi-club thing didn't really take off. For a while, UEFA, dropped all those other competitions. So then we get to sort of the last 5-10 years. We're back to 3 competitions again. We're back to multi-club as as the sort of key, as I said, strategy of the moment. And I think what's sort of changed it is we are seeing these groups proliferate, and we're seeing them pick up more and more clubs. And some of them have very, very, I think it's on purpose, have gone for sort of better clubs than perhaps previous investors were thinking. So instead of having a really, really clear kind of pecking order, and we're all serving that top club, it's all about funneling talent up and sort of cutting costs and helping them recruit better. They've started to sort of hedge their bets a bit, right? We're going to have a decent team there, we'll have a decent team there, and we'll just sort of see how it goes. I'm not going to pick a favourite here. And then, hey, presto, they all qualify for Europe. And you're like, well, that's a nice problem to have because our teams are quite good. But now we have this UEFA issue. So we've had Villa and Vittoria. We had Brighton and Union Saint-Gilloise. We've had Nice and Manchester United. We've had, is it Braga and PSG? I know I'm forgetting some, where they've qualified for European competition. And UEFA have said, oh my God, we didn't really see this coming. Yeah. But now it's right in front of us. What are we going to do? And of course, Red Bull were the first. This strange split they did between Salzburg
and
Leipzig, where, Red Bull almost sort of dared UEFA to do something about it. Well, go on, we're going to play in this competition. We've qualified fair and square. What are you going to do about it? And UEFA said, well, we're not going to let you. Right, okay, well, we'll separate staff. We'll sort of ring fence this. We'll change the name of Leipzig, became Rasenball or whatever. And we're just going to create Chinese walls. There you go. Is that good enough? And UEFA kind of blinked and went, yeah, okay. And there was your precedent, that if you can create Chinese walls, you should be okay. UEFA do appear to have kind of perhaps realised that was a mistake. and they have been a lot more interventionist. So they kind of have forced Brighton, is a good example, in Union St Gilloise, to properly separate. Bloom had to hands over some shares. They also put some kind of guardrails in place saying, you can't trade players to each other. I don't know how they'd even police this, but we're not even going to let you share recruitment data. I think they did the same with Villa, had to dilute some of their shareholdings of Victoria, and I think Braga and PSG as well. So they've been tweaking. I think Nice and Man United was quite an interesting one. They basically asked Man United and Radcliffe Ineos to almost put Nice in a trust, and again create really strict separation between staff. So that's where we're at. We're at almost like a bespoke approach, where UEFA are kind of looking at the groups and going, oh, right, okay, you've both qualified. Oh, geez. Okay, well, look, we're not going to let you trade players. He can't work for both of you. Get him off the board. Can we knock you down to below 30%? It's almost a bit like that. They're kind of going through a bit of a menu, and it's a negotiation. Now, I think that's the best they can do.
All right, now the final point on operational success was another key point, actually, that was raised at the end. Is that something you expect to hear more about tomorrow, Matt, when we chat with people who work within MCOs, this idea of operational success?
Okay, well, look, we're talking to two people in our Tuesday episode. One is Tim Bazbetchenko, who is the president of Black Knight. Black Knight are a really interesting multi-club group. Kind of newish, but they are doing really well. So it's Bill Foley's the main man there. They own Bournemouth. He first started off with the Vegas Golden Knights, who are an ice hockey team. They were an expansion team, immediately successful and still good. So they're really good in the NHL. He loves football. He's an Anglophile. Buys Bournemouth. I think we've talked about Bournemouth. Bournemouth are doing well. He's just started a relationship with Hibs. Hibs have started to pick up. He owns 30% of Lorient in France. They got relegated last year. Boo hiss. But they're top of Ligue 2, and they looks like they're heading back. And another really interesting move, he bought another expansion team in the A-League. He bought the Auckland City franchise, the New Zealand franchise that's gone into the A-League in Australia. And last time I looked, they're top. So at the moment, you've got Bournemouth doing really, really well, Lorient top of their league, Auckland City top of their league, and Hibs have got better. So I think they're really interesting. We're also going to talk to Larry Berg, who is one of the really interesting group of money investors who are in LAFC, very successful MLS team. They have a really intriguing relationship with Bayern Munich, a joint venture called Red and Gold, that have academies in Africa, in Uruguay. Where else have they invested? They've just bought is it a Swedish team or a Danish team? I can't remember. They've got a very small Austrian team. Oh, they bought Grasshopper in Zurich. Yeah, from the people at the Fosun Group who own Wolves. So there was another multi-club group. So they bought somebody else's part there. So they've built a really interesting group. LAFC are probably their main thing, the thing that they're really interested in. I really like the Bayern joint venture. I don't think I want to hear from Larry. Has it actually started to deliver yet? They've got this really cool looking academy in is it Ghana or is it Gambia? Gambia, and as I say, I think they're just opening one in Senegal. So I think Larry's going to talk a bit more from a kind of an investor point of view.
Okay,
like what does he want? Why is he doing this?
Fantastic. Look, thanks for your time today, Matt. Really appreciate it. And also to AJ Swoboda from 21st Group as well. Tomorrow we'll be talking about what it takes to run an MCO. And remember to get your questions on multi-club ownership for Wednesday's episode as well. And also thank you lot for joining us. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. And if you haven't already done it, make sure you drop us a little comment as well. Right, that's it for now. We're back next time. If you want to watch more episodes of the show, please subscribe to the channel. We'll be joined by the likes of David Ornstein, Matt Slater, Adam Crafton, Carl Anker, and plenty more through the season. If you'd like to listen to the episodes in full in audio form, search The Athletic FC wherever you get your podcasts from.